Sarah and her bevy of girls abandoned, taken from NJS novel Buried Secret. In a remote village of hope, a newly autonomous community. The arrival of a male child was both a blessing to families. The birth of a male child in the Hope community was seen as a divine gift, a direct blessing from Almighty God. In Hope community, where traditions ran deep and unyielding, the birth of a male child was the pinnacle of womanhood. It was not just a family affair, but a community-wide celebration, signifying strength, legacy, and the continuation of lineage. A male child was a bearer of the family name, the one destined to till the soil, inherit lands, and sit among the elders. Sarah's husband, Isaac, had endured the taunts of neighbors and relatives for years. A tree without a son is a fruitless tree, they would say, a phrase that cut deeply into his pride. For Mr. Philip, the only son of the late Mr. Kenneth, marriage was less about companionship and more about legacy. The weight of his father's name and lineage pressed heavily upon him. When he married Sarah at the tender age of 18, it wasn't love that motivated him, but urgency. The urgency to produce male heirs to carry on the family name. He believed starting young would increase his chances of fathering many sons. Little did he know, the power to determine the sex of a child lay in nature, not his desire, and in the hands of God, who gives children in his own time. Their marriage bore fruit early, with Sarah giving birth to their first child after just a year. The news of her safe delivery filled the air, and the women of the village gathered to celebrate. But when the midwife announced it's a girl, Mr. Philip's joy turned sour. He masked his disappointment in public, but grew cold towards Sarah in private. The second pregnancy brought hope of redemption, but when Sarah gave birth to another girl, the whispers of the community grew louder. The third child only solidified Mr. Philip's frustration. 3 daughters, the villagers mocked. Is Philip building a house of daughters for Sarah's clan? These words stung his pride, and he began to withdraw emotionally, seeing Sarah as the bearer of his shame. When Sarah delivered the 4th child, a friend told Mr. Philip that it was another girl. Mr. Philip's patience snapped. He stormed out of the house, leaving her to fend for herself and their daughters. To him, the marriage had lost its salt, its value. The daughters were not enough. They were a disappointment, a reminder of his failure to fulfill the expectations of his family and society. Sarah, though heartbroken, found solace in her children's innocent faces. The whispers of the community that blamed her for the absence of a male child cut deep, yet she clung to her faith. She believed that children, male or female, were gifts from God. What kind of man abandons his family because of daughters? She whispered to herself, cradling her newborn as her other daughters looked on with wide, worried eyes. Despite the ridicule, Sarah vowed to raise her daughters with strength and dignity. If the world saw them as less than sons, she would show the world their worth. Little did Mr. Philip know, the daughters he rejected would one day be his greatest pride. But for now, his absence was a scar on the family, and Sarah was left to bear the burden of survival alone. During his time of self-imposed exile, Mr. Philip drowned his frustrations in the hazy warmth of palm wine and the noisy comfort of the local bar in a neighboring community. It became his refuge, a place where his failures as a husband and father seemed momentarily washed away. It was during one of these bar visits that fate placed him at a table with Mr. Silas, his childhood friend. Silas, known for his wisdom and steady demeanor, had watched from afar as Philip's life unraveled. That evening, after a few cups of the strong, bitter drink, Silas leaned in and spoke with a tone of calm authority. "Philip, my brother, do you know the wisdom in Oliver de Coke's song, NWUNW?" Philip stared into his drink, avoiding Silas's gaze, but he listened. "A child is a child, my friend, whether boy or girl. It is your responsibility as a father to train them. God gave you those children for a reason, not to abandon them, but to guide them. If you have the means, give them an education. That's what matters." Silas's words stirred something in Philip, but the deep-rooted beliefs he had inherited from his father weighed heavily on him. In Hope community, where traditional knowledge often overshadowed modern science, most people were ignorant of the biological factors that determined a child's sex. The concepts of X and Y chromosomes, while known to a few, were mysteries to Philip. He, like many men of his time, believed the blame lay solely with the woman. Philip's own upbringing only reinforced this notion. His father, Mr. Kenneth, had married young with the sole purpose of fathering sons who would grow into strong farmers and continue the family name. But Mr. Kenneth's dream was cut short. He only had Philip, his lone child, before passing away at the age of 42. This burden of being the only son was a weight Philip had carried since childhood, shaped by endless whispers of the community and the looming expectations of his late father. Philip's wife, Sarah, bore the brunt of this societal ignorance. Her 3 daughters, whom she cherished, were seen by the community as her failure. Gossip moved like wildfire through Hope, carried by women who had little else to occupy their time. They called her names behind her back. The cruel whispers cut deeply into Sarah's spirit, especially the unfounded accusations about past abortions, a narrative fabricated entirely by gossip mongers. Some women even claimed her daughters were cursed, pointing to their bright eyes and delicate features as proof of a mystical exchange. Others blamed her for Philip's abandonment, saying she was too proud, too Western, to pray for a male child. Sarah, already battling her internal struggles, found herself isolated. With Philip gone, she relied on her faith and her daughters to survive. She worked tirelessly in the farm to feed them, all while enduring the relentless judgment of the community. Her daughters, still too young to understand the full weight of their mother's pain, tried in their own ways to bring her comfort. Meanwhile, Philip wrestled with his pride and Silas's words. Returning home was no easy task. To face Sarah and the daughters he had abandoned meant confronting the shame he felt as a man and the pain he had inflicted as a husband and father. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the echo of Silas's words refused to leave him. Train them. If you have the means, that's what matters. On returning home, Mr. Philip's heart raced as he lay on the bamboo bed, the silence around him growing heavier with every passing moment. The once bustling home, filled with the laughter and chatter of his daughters, now felt like an empty shell. His thoughts spiraled uncontrollably. What if something terrible has happened to them? He wondered, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool evening breeze. He sat up abruptly, unable to endure the uncertainty any longer. I must find them, he resolved, though dread gnawed at his resolve. His first stop was a village stream, Nome, a place where Sarah often took the girls to fetch water or wash clothes. The journey felt endless, his mind replaying images of his daughters, their faces innocent yet accusing. When he reached the stream, it was deserted except for a few women washing clothes. He scanned their faces, but none belonged to Sarah or his daughters. He hesitated before asking one of the women, "Please, have you seen my wife, Sarah?" The woman paused, looking at him with a mixture of pity and something else. Contempt, perhaps. She shook her head without a word and continued washing, the sound of the water splashing against stones filling the awkward silence. Philip's unease deepened as he trudged to the popular Eek market, hoping to find Sarah buying food or selling produce. The market, usually vibrant with the calls of traders and the laughter of children, offered no solace. He scanned the stalls, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. An older trader, Maman Ketchi, glanced at him briefly, then quickly turned her attention to arranging her vegetables. Even those who usually greeted him with warm smiles now avoided his gaze, their conversations halting mid-sentence as he passed by. What is happening? Philip thought, his chest tightening. The coldness of the villagers was unsettling. People who once hailed him as Nwokum now seemed to shrink away, as though his presence tainted the air around them. The few who managed to mutter good evening did so with expressions of disdain, their eyes darting away as if they feared lingering too long in his presence. The walk back to his empty home was torturous, his mind flooded with grim possibilities. Had his family perished in his absence? Had the community turned against him for his neglect? He remembered the old tales of sacrilege, how those who abandoned their families were sometimes cursed by the gods. Could that be his fate? Reaching his compound, Philip slumped onto the bamboo bed once more, his body heavy with exhaustion and fear. His gaze drifted to the roof, and he whispered, "What have I done?" He had not only abandoned his family, but had also abandoned his role as a man, a father, and a husband. As the night deepened, his thoughts grew darker. Could they have died of hunger? He wondered, guilt washing over him in waves. The image of his wife, weak and struggling to feed their daughters, haunted him. He imagined his newborn crying helplessly in Sarah's arms, and his heart clenched with pain. He had left them to fend for themselves, all because he couldn't bear the thought of having another girl. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence, a rustling in the distance. Philip bolted upright, hope sparking in his chest. He rushed to the compound's entrance, straining to see through the darkness. But there was no one there, only the wind brushing against the leaves. Defeated, Philip returned to his bed, staring into the night. The realization hit him with full force. His actions had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. He had not only failed his family, but also himself. Now, the question loomed larger than ever. Where was Sarah, and what had become of his daughters? "Mr. Philip, you shameless man," Mrs. Kinley-Co began, her voice rising with each word. "How dare you show your face here after abandoning your wife and daughters for months? Do you think we haven't seen the tears Sarah shed every day because of your wickedness? Do you think we don't know how she struggled to feed those poor children while you were out drinking yourself into stupidity?